everybody. Hope this message finds you well, healthy, and sane, and hopefully you're enjoying this rainy afternoon. Um, 3 weeks after the shelter in place order was issued here in California, I find that my days are not as smooth, or at least not as structured as they were before. And there seems to be more distractions, more stressors, what I call those micro irritants. These are not big things going bad, just a bunch of little ones that can stress me out during the normal course of the day. And, without restating the usual triggers, I think that it's fair to say that while we're all adapting to this pretty well, there's still, most of us are wound up a little extra tight these days. And one of my daily rituals that has had a tremendously positive impact on my overall psyche and helps me deal with the often inevitable overwhelm is morning journaling. Now, there's a lot of science supporting benefits of journaling in lowering stress levels, improving focus, bolstering our immune system, and building mental and emotional resilience to live better lives day by day. And at a time when our mental and emotional resilience seems to be constantly challenged, I'm very excited to have Melanie Vetter join our conversation to talk about journaling for positivity and resilience. Now, Melanie is a life and journaling coach who believes that our story is the key to the life we want. And by reflecting and writing our stories, we gain clarity on what we really want and how to get it. Melanie will guide us today through simple journaling practices. So, journaling 101, if you will, and teach us to use reflective writing to dramatically improve how we feel and how we show up for our families, for our partners, and most importantly, for our children. And so, with that being said, I'm going to bring Melanie into conversation. Hi, Melanie.
Hey, thank you so much for having me, Roman. I really, really appreciate being here. And what a great introduction. You could practically do my speech for me.
I couldn't, but thank you so much for being here. It's
Yeah,
great to have you.
thank you. Thank you. So yeah, you're absolutely right. We need these tools now more than ever. We always need these tools because they're not just for hard times, they're also for figuring out what we really want in terms of our career or what we really want with our family. But right now, we are all in a situation where we could use just some other simple things to help us stay calm, stay centered.
Hmm.
And in fact, today I was thinking about how these tools actually can help you find compassion as well for yourself. Inevitably, we're going to get irritated. We're going to say things we don't necessarily want to say. And then actually journaling about how we can have compassion for ourselves or for the other people who we're dealing with can be a really amazing tool for keeping things calm and peaceful and pleasant, especially for our children.
Well, it's a wonderful place to start. So, if you wouldn't mind, just take a couple of minutes and just take us through sort of all the benefits you've mentioned of narrative and expressive writing and journaling.
Yeah.
Tell us
So,
more.
in normal times, I do a lecture on journaling for resilience and joy. And what do I mean by that? And what do I mean by resilience? So a lot of times people say, Susie's resilient, Tommy's not that resilient. But in fact, resilience is a set of skills. It's not a trait. You don't have it or don't have it. It's a set of skills that we can actually practice. And what I love to do is go back and look at times that you've actually struggled and kind of figure out what worked. What did I do right? What could I have done differently? How could I have possibly avoided that struggle or done it with or gone through it with more ease and grace? And by looking back at our stories of, say, when we've been overwhelmed, we start to get clues as to how to avoid the overwhelm and how we can get through it. So I'll give you a personal example of that. I actually have what I call my overwhelm checklist. So by journaling, because I don't like that feeling of overwhelm and I wanted to figure it out. So by going back and looking and getting curious and writing about the times that was overwhelmed, and I try to do it like in the moment. Okay, I'm overwhelmed. What's going on? I can start seeing patterns. For example, 3 days or 2 days before I start to get overwhelmed, I start losing my keys, my glasses, and my cell phone. I am a really organized person. I put everything in the same place all the time, but all of a sudden those things start getting lost. And then I start to feel this physical feeling of irritation. And then I start to get irritated and angry. And so it's not a really pretty sight, and I want to avoid it. So what
Mhm.
I figured out was, what are ways that in the past, when I've been overwhelmed, what could I do to help myself get out of that overwhelm? And so I, again, turned to that pen and paper and started writing about things that I know can help me. And I created this list. It's like a pilot's checklist, right? You know, when the pilots are in their plane and the light goes off and it says landing gears not coming down, they don't just sit there and say, oh, I wonder what I should do next. They actually have a list. So I have created a list for myself through journaling. I've then summarized it on one piece of paper that sits on my wall and says, if you're feeling this, go outside. If you're starting to lose your keys and your phone, stop, figure out what it is that's making you feel overwhelmed. And this is just a really simple tool that any of us can use if you just want to take the time to figure out what is a struggle that you have, how have you successfully managed it, and then finding a list of ways that you personally, because my list is going to be completely different from your list, how you can figure out how to get out of overwhelm or anxiety or anger. What are tools that you can use? So those are tools for resilience.
Hmm.
And right now, I think they're really, really important. We can talk about tools for positivity as well. And one of my favorites is gratitude. And believe it or not, gratitude is actually a tool of resilience. Our brains are wired for negativity. We're constantly searching for that lion on the savannah, or right now we're constantly trying to avoid not being 6 feet away from somebody. So we're on high alert. And one of the best ways to calm ourselves down is to look for the good in our life, all the little good things. So just like Roman said, you have a morning journaling, I have a nighttime journaling practice that I've been doing for years and years, and it's super easy and simple.
Hmm.
Every night I write just one sentence about one thing I'm grateful for and why. One small thing that I have achieved that day, because that idea of feeling successful is very uplifting. And then one person who I've connected with and how it felt. And literally, I keep this in my phone in the notes section. It's just a micro journaling technique. And I can, if I'm having a bad day, I actually can roll back 3 years and read all of these people I've connected with, all the small little things that I've done, all of the goodness in my life. And it's 95% of the time, okay, 5% of the time I might just be stuck in negativity, but it really lifts my spirit to read it. And it really helps me go to sleep if I end my day by focusing on the
Hmm.
good.
So, can I ask you a couple of follow-up questions to that?
Absolutely.
Um, do you do paper journaling or do you journal online?
Well, you know what? I would love to handwrite, because I do think the slowing down
Mhm.
of pen on paper actually helps you get to it. Sadly, I have a little bit of arthritis in my last joints, and my doctor has said, you either have to dictate or type. Typing's easier on your hands. It took me a year to be able to get the same process of the pen on paper. I love pen on paper. And still, if I'm writing someone a letter, and I'm a huge letter writer, I'll type the version so that I can get it down, and then I will handwrite it. But I save my
Mm.
handwriting for writing letters. Do you journal by hand?
I found that whenever I put pen to physical paper, not the one that glows in front of you,
Right.
um, I connect differently to the words that are being written down, and so I absolutely do the journaling on paper,
Yeah. Yeah.
and I find it to be immensely helpful.
Yeah, I think a lot of people are like you. I also feel that I have a lot of clients who have that gremlin sitting on their shoulder that says, "That's not what you want to be writing. That's not right.
Mhm.
That's not right." And for some of them, it's liberating to type because they know that it's easy to edit. And I know that sounds weird when you're talking about journaling and editing, but sometimes you want to go back and say, no, I didn't get that quite right. I want to move that, or I want to move it around, or it just takes away that gremlin. So every single person I've worked with is different.
Hmm.
Um, I love to handwrite. I just can't physically do it that much anymore. So I made, I've moved successfully to typing.
Okay. Well, one of the things that I wanted to talk to you about, or have you talk to us about, is first kind of set the stage of. You told us why we should consider journaling, especially at a time like this, and the benefits that we can experience from it. The reflection, the gratitude, and being more structured, feeling more accomplished by actually putting our thoughts down on paper. Can you give us some of the science that supports all of this, and what are the ways that journaling can help us? And then, if we can shift gears, and maybe you can give us some practical tips, because I know this is potentially an intimidating start for some people when, if they haven't journaled, it's
Yeah.
just a lot to take in and not knowing where to start.
Yeah.
So, again, just going back, tell us what are the benefits and some of the support behind journaling?
Yeah. So before I go there, I want to say a word about journaling. So I am a big believer that journaling with reflection is really powerful. So in other words, if I'm writing a story about something that happened to me and I'm just complaining on the page, that actually can not be good for you. It just reinforces the negativity.
Hmm.
But if I'm reflecting on why is this story important and what am I learning from it, then the journaling becomes incredibly powerful. It allows us to get clarity on what's important to us. It allows us to, in a way that feels safe, explore difficult topics in our lives. And it's a gentle way of rewiring what might be a difficult story into a learning story, a lesson for the future. And this type of journaling, believe it or not, has been studied in double-blind studies. And I think it's, if you want to look it up, it's called narrative writing. And it has been shown to be as effective for depression and anxiety as therapy and um, medication, if done under the supervision, obviously, of somebody who can teach you how to do it. And there are good books out there that can show you how to do it as well. And you can just look it up and try it. I'm not suggesting that you do it instead of seeing your therapist, but you might talk to. But a lot of therapists actually use narrative therapy in addition to talk therapy and medication. So it is an accepted tool. I am not a medical person. But I use this technique. I am a guided autobiography instructor, and that is a scientifically created program that helps people look at their lives with reflection, with the goal of moving forward and learning from their stories. And it's wonderful for kids. I mean, for kids to hear your stories and hear what you've learned from your stories and why the stories were important, especially those stories of ups and downs.
Hmm.
It can show them that life is not either black or white or up or down or positive or negative, that there's more. It's more nuanced, and that, yes, you might have struggled, but you learned from the struggle and you persevered and you had that grittiness, or you had somebody help you. You asked a mentor. I mean, these are important lessons for our kids that we can share from our own stories, from our own struggles, once we've reflected on why the story is important.
All
Did
right,
that?
so we're going to pivot again, because this is a really important topic, I think, to a lot of people that are going to be watching this.
Yeah.
And that is, we're all kind of cooped up at home with kids right now of various ages.
Yeah.
A lot of kids don't have the context, to really put all of the feelings into, or some of the experiences that they're observing, even if they're just looking at us as parents and how we behave ourselves and how we show up for them. Can you talk a little bit about how journaling, or just writing and narrative writing, can help for us in developing those stories, and also how we can work with our kids better?
Yeah. So I'm going to stay in on the resilience part for a second, but then I want to jump to the way in which it can be really fun to figure out what it is you want to do with the rest of your life, or who you are, because that may be really something exciting to do with your kids.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so in terms of the resilience, I think one of the things that I really focus on with kids is the positivity, the gratitude. So actually having a little bit of a family, I don't, your kids are a range in age. Obviously, the 1.5-year-old's not going to be writing, but even a 5-year-old can
Hmm.
write what good thing happened to me? What feeling did I feel that made me feel good? What did mommy do or daddy do that helped me today? And focus on that. And for ourselves, in order to be good parents, to actually focus on these positivity tools helps us get calm. It helps us have gratitude for what we still can control,
Hmm.
and what we can still do. And part of that is also self compassion, not beating yourself up. Taking care of yourself is a really important thing right now. Being self compassionate. If you screw up, we're going to all screw up. We are. We're going to say something we didn't want to say, but realizing that we're all human and making those mistakes together, and taking care of ourselves by being self-compassionate, saying, I know you feel bad about that. It's okay. You're going to try to do better, is a way of taking care of us so we can take care of them. And teaching them these tools for themselves. So if they screw up, teaching them how to be self-compassionate themselves might be incredibly powerful right now. And then let's talk about some of the fun stuffs. I talk about writing for resilience and joy. Now, joy is different than happiness. I'm a big believer that we can't search for happiness. We can create it in micro doses of joy.
Hmm.
And paying attention to those joyful moments in our day is incredibly important. And by looking at them and figuring out why they created joy for us, or why they made us feel in flow, that feeling? You're
Hmm.
totally energized, hours go by, you stop your task and you feel more energy than when you started. Those things are very, very important to focus on for us and our kids, because those stories of times you've been in those flow are clues to what is important to you at your core, what provides energy and engagement for you, and using that information to add little bits of that every day to your life. So for me, um, nature is something that is incredibly important to me. So sure, I'd love to go hiking in Yosemite, but I can't do that every day. But I can go outside and I can look up at the redwood tree in my backyard. And I can feel that awe, that feeling of being connected to something greater than myself. And I can honor that desire for nature just in 3 minutes, microdoses of joy. And writing about things that make you alive, make you feel happy, is a great way of figuring out what you want. In fact, I take my clients through an exercise called the ideal day. And I had a client who said, I said to her, "What would your ideal day look like?" And she wrote the story. And one of the things she said is, "I want to be in pristine wilderness." Now she has kids like your kids' age, and that's not likely to happen, that she's going to go take them someplace where there's no humans. She wasn't talking about she wanted to go to Yosemite. She wanted to go someplace where no humans were. Like, she wanted to be an explorer of that wilderness. And so I said, okay, what is it about that you really want? And she did some more journaling, and she came back with awe, which I understood because awe is an important feeling for me. And she laughed and said, quite frankly, I just want a little quiet from the kids. So we laughed about that. And then I said, well, how could you honor that in your day? And she said, well, I could go for a little hike after I drop my kids off from school down this creek, and look up at the trees and look at the creek before I go back and run back to my computer and get back to work. And if I need some quiet, I can just go into my room for 30 seconds and close the door and take some deep breaths. So that's the beauty of figuring out what matters to you, and then figuring out how to add it to your day each day. And right now, that's really important. How can you, in the space we're in right now, honor what matters to you in little tiny doses, so that each day still feels like it matters. And what you're doing right now, to me, this connection that you are creating, this community, that is joy.
It
And I
is for
can
me
see,
too.
yeah,
I hope it is
I
for
was
a
just
lot of
going to
people.
say, I can see in your face that you are creating joy for yourself
Yeah,
and other people.
right.
And that's something that now you know that this is really important to you,
Hmm.
right?
So when it comes to, I keep saying journaling, but it's really just putting down and sort of documenting your thoughts and feelings.
Yeah.
And I've heard you talk about, on one hand, stories, on the other hand, these micro kind of bursts of thoughts.
Mhm.
So they both seem to have a different application and somewhat of a different purpose, and one is seemingly easier to do than the other. Can you distinguish and tell us a little bit more? Sort of what should we start with? Should we do more of the, like, what is it that I feel good about and just write it down to help us create that sense of flow? Or should we start to think about stories and deeper reflection in our lives?
So I'm going to say both. But here's why
I
I say
thought as an ex-attorney, you might say it depends.
it depends exactly. No, here's why I say both. So yes, you want to remember these little moments, but the only way you're actually going to create a concrete memory is to write it in a story. We as humans communicate through story. And we have these senses, smelling and taste and hearing and all of that, and what we feel inside. And when we start to write down those aspects of what we're talking about in sort of a story, like I was, who were you with? All of those concrete details, you create a really deep memory as opposed to just jotting down things. So yes, it's important to I do both. So in other words, I do my little thing at night, but I also write stories like full on, not for somebody else to read necessarily, but we will talk about stories that you want to share as well. But stories in the sense that I'm using storytelling technique. So what was I feeling then? What am I feeling now? What did I taste, hear, smell, see, feel on my skin, feel in my heart?
Hmm.
In order to create a real memory of that episode, and then it allows me to remember more. It allows me to remember what I learned. So it's a matter of actually just rewiring your
Hmm.
brain to remember more about that story if it's important. So that's why I use both.
Got it. So the micro journaling is more on the daily practice, could be in the evening for you, morning for me, and then the story journaling is something that you do less frequently, I imagine,
No,
and
I
it's
do it
deeper.
often. I do
You
it
do.
often, but I also, well, that's because this is what I do, and I find
Okay.
it incredibly helpful. But I don't write every day at that level. But I do journaling prompts with my clients. I have them do these techniques so that they can figure out who are they at their core.
Mhm.
What strengths do they already have? What is it that they really want their life to look like? This is an incredibly powerful way.
Mm.
You have all the information you need right inside of you, but you can't tap into it necessarily just by thinking about it. But the process of writing, all those swirling thoughts, all those hidden memories, they start coming out when you start writing with sensory details and reflection. And then you can learn from them.
No, that's absolutely true, and I actually just wanted to follow up on that, and I know that you teach, how to write stories, and you do workshops, and I think you work individually with your clients, and I'm gonna ask you to tell us where we can learn more, but are there any, in a short, tips that you can provide for us, on how to better write a story, and how long should a story like that be for us? I mean, there's a lot of people who might not have journaled their own stories before. Where
Yeah.
should they start? How should they do this?
Let's see. Well, I have a ton of resources on my website, which I'll put my website in your comments, and also some resources potentially that I can share for you. But it really depends. Sometimes you can get the story out in a paragraph, and
Hmm.
sometimes it takes 5 pages. And so it depends on, also, I work with people who want to share their stories, and they might want to share them with their children. And then maybe the story is going to be 2 or 3 pages. And again, there's a lot of the sensory details, showing, not tell, show, not tell. You remember that from elementary school? Don't tell me the story, show me the story. Really important, those sensory details. What did I learn? What do I want my child to know about this story? So though that in that way, I'd say you'd have like 2 to 3 pages based on how old the kid is. But I'm working with somebody right now who has 450-page book that, you know, all of his stories of his life. I don't usually do that kind of work, but I happen to really like this gentleman and want to help him get his book out. But generally speaking, in my workshops, people are writing 1,000 words at the very most, 600 to 1,000 words on a topic where they're going to take a deep dive and really explore. But when we're together, and not in between, when they're writing on their own, they're writing maybe a paragraph at a time. And I'm taking them deeper and deeper into a topic. So maybe we make a list first. I take one of those things and write the story with the details, and then we might reflect on it. And so it's a practice that you can get into. It's not hard. We can all do it. As I said, humans communicate through story. You just have to get in touch with that again. And I will share resources in the comments with you.
That would be great, because I think that for a lot of people, and myself included, as comfortable as I am with micro journaling, as I just start to think about what would I want to write about, and there's certainly a lot of lessons that I've had in my own life, and we're all sort of a product of our life and experiences and places we've been, but I wouldn't know where to start. So I wonder if there's a good prescriptive set of questions that you might sort of get the process started that we can then put pen to paper.
Yeah. So actually, the way I work with my clients is I give them like 15 prompts on a single theme, and they're not meant to be answered necessarily. They're thought questions. So what I always suggest to people is read the questions, take them for a walk, come back and see what happens when you put your hand on the paper. And, you know, the story is going to come to you. And if it doesn't, then you can actually answer each of the prompts. And then halfway through prompt 6, you're going to find the story. So that's why it's called guided autobiography, because you're guided by these prompts in order to stimulate your memory. So yeah, there's just tons and tons of, I write a blog once a week, and the next week I write something called Write With Me, and it's always got writing prompts. So there's just enormous numbers of prompts on my website. But I'm happy to share some prompts. I just finished writing something about self-compassion, actually. So maybe I'll share with you a document that you can then share with your audience that has a couple of thought questions that might be good for this time. The other thing I think is really easy to do is if you have a journaling guide, which I do, which on gratitude. So I have a guide called 7 Days of Gratitude, and you can repeat it every single week. And it has just a small practice where you're writing, and then a way in which you can expand that if you want to go deeper.
And where can folks find this guide?
It's called 7 Days of Gratitude, and I will put the link. It's free. I will put the link in your show notes. I'll give it to you for your show notes, and I'll also do it in the comments.
That would be very, very helpful. Thank you for that.
Sure. And if people want to come and journal with me, I have a free journaling workshop every single Wednesday. This week it's at 1:00 because it's Passover and I gotta cook. But otherwise it's at 4:00 on Wednesdays. And again, I'll put the link in the comment.
Perfect.
And I actually have a workshop that I do pretty much monthly, which is about writing for resilience and joy. If you want to come and actually try what we're talking about, which is tomorrow, not a lot of notice, at noon. And again, I'll put the link in your comment.
Okay. And so what's the workshop tomorrow?
The workshop tomorrow is called Writing for Resilience and Joy at 12:00. All these are in Pacific time, of course. And all 3 of those things are free. So yeah.
Well, and since we're on the topic of having wonderful resources from you, I would urge anyone and everyone who's listening to this or will be listening to this, is to subscribe to Melanie's mailing list, because I get these wonderful stories, and oftentimes just reading your stories make me feel better because you
Well,
write them in such a very thoughtful way. And they often will kind of spark other thoughts in my mind of creativity that make me go a little bit deeper and pause on whatever is going on that day and to reflect and go deeper. So that, if nothing else, without even putting pen to paper, reading your stories have been helpful for me as well. So I urge you guys to get on, is it wellfleet.circle.com, and sign
it's
up for the mailing list.
it's just wellfleetcircle.com. Yeah,
Perfect.
wellfleetcircle.com.
Great.
Exactly.
So can you tell us a little bit more? I just want to take another minute or two. And you mentioned stories that we write for ourselves, and then stories that we write to share.
Yes.
And one of the things that you've mentioned is stories that we share with kids. Now,
Yeah.
I realize kids, people who are listening to this, vary in ages. Some might be more or less appropriate, but can you just spend some time,
Yeah.
tell us more about how to do that better and
So,
why?
yeah. So actually, I am a huge believer in writing letters to my children. And I'll give you one example. My son, when he went off to college, I slid a letter into his dresser so he could find it after I leave. Because when you're 18 years old, you don't want to have anything gushy from your mom. But I was not even a half an hour away from campus when I got a text. Thank you, Mom. Which is huge when it's an 18-year-old. But what I was trying to show him in that letter was that if he felt like he needed help, that all of the adults there wanted to help him. He just had to ask and remember, and that not to isolate himself in his room. But if I had said it, don't isolate in your room, don't play video games, he would never have listened.
Right.
So I just remind him in a story about what happened when he took a risk and went out and found new friends in high school, so that he could remember, oh yeah, I was successful at that. I shouldn't be so scared about finding friends. I can stay in my room. But I've been writing these letters to my kids on their birthdays, on graduations, special events. And I had a big birthday this summer, and my husband kept asking me, what do you want? What do you want? And I said, you know what I want. And he did. He asked all of my relatives and my closest friends, and they all wrote me a letter with a story of why we met, or how we met, why our friendship's important, what they remember about our times together. It was the greatest gift I've ever had. But in terms of your kids, there's a wonderful study out of Emory University that children who know their family's stories are more resilient, more successful at school, understand that struggles are part of life, and that they therefore can be grittier. Like if a struggle happens, they know if I push through this, they know to ask for help. They know who can help them. So these are really important stories for kids to know, and to write them in a letter. Maybe not I would love to do it every single year, so that when your kid's 18, you give them a book, picture from their birthday and the letter that you wrote. Wouldn't that be amazing? Of course, I didn't find this until my oldest was 20. So I've been catching up. And that's fine, because what I can do is I can also share memories of when he was little, and things about him when my oldest one, he was the most empathetic child, and then he became like a total brat. But, that's because he was a teenager. But I could still tell him stories about what he was like as a baby. And now he loves them, loves looking at those stories. So you can do that anytime you want. And sometimes it's easier for especially, a kid who's in the preteen and teenage years to read it than to hear you say something. And then when they're feeling bad, they might pull that letter out and read it again and know and feel your support. But anyhow, the study from Emory University is a fantastic one that confirms what I saw when I did this for my kids. And I teach people how to do this. So that's just, but you can just write a letter to your kids about what you're feeling right now. I mean, maybe it would be helpful for them to know that you also feel a little anxious and bored or agitated. And here are the things that I'm hoping to do. I mean, I think that that's a really powerful thing to share with them, so that they don't think it's just me and dad's got his act all together. Right?
Well, and I think that that's true. Kids observe us and they watch us all the time, but we don't quite know exactly what they're seeing, do we? Until they tell us, and they may not be for a long, long while.
Yeah.
And it sounds like writing a letter is not only a benefit for them, it's a benefit for us to be able to put those thoughts and feelings right in front of our own faces
Yeah.
and to confront those feelings ourselves.
Yeah. And I will offer one other thing about letter writing. Write to your parents if you still have them.
Mm.
Write to your siblings. I I created a book for both my father-in-law and my father when they turned 90, got every single grandkid to write a letter to them. And my father said, "This is the best present ever anyone's ever given to me." And for my father-in-law, he said, "Oh my God, I had a great life." Right?
Mm.
So these things are really incredibly powerful. And writing these letters, oh my God, when you finish writing that letter, you feel good. So I do encourage people to do that. And again, on my blog, if you go in there and you look for, I call them legacy letters. I've changed it now, letters to share gratitude, or letters to guide your children. There are all sorts of templates of how to do this. So, and you can email me if you have questions. Don't hold back. I'm here to help.
I'm going to put your email so people can take note of it. And when you started talking about writing a letter to our parents, siblings, I mean, that's powerful. I think you, if you go any deeper, you're going to have some teary eyes on the screen.
Yeah. Well, and you
Wonderful.
don't have to have it be in the middle of a pandemic. It could just
That's
be
right.
your birthday, right? I
Well,
remember
we all,
I wrote to my brother for his 50th birthday because he's 7 years younger than me. And when I was in college, I was a math major, and I couldn't get statistics. And my brother's unbelievable math genius, and he was like 12, I think, and he tutored me every week over the landline. And I managed to get an A- in the class. It was like, I had to tell him, like, he never made me feel stupid. Here he was, a 12-year-old, and I was 20. And he
that's,
never made me feel stupid.
well, that's incredible. So, if um, if I was to summarize what I remember, kind of the key points from your talk, and that is, try to do a combination of micro journaling anytime throughout the day of just putting our thoughts on paper,
Yeah.
and then also taking some time to write those longer stories, both in terms of our family story, but also stories about our family members or even our kids.
Mhm.
Anything else that I might have missed, or anything that you'd want to mention that we can do?
Yeah, I honestly think gratitude journaling is incredibly powerful right now. And I really encourage you to try to find the good every day, even now, especially now.
And do you want to leave us with any final thoughts on how we might be able to do that in case we're not sure where to start?
Well, you can get my guide, or you
Mhm.
can just physically write down, or in your, I mean, literally, mine's on the notes section in my phone, and it says three good things. And every day I have the date and I write 3 sentences. It's as simple as that. If you start your day with, here's what I'm looking forward to, here's what I hope to accomplish, here's who I want to connect with, end your day with, here's what I'm grateful for, here's what one small thing I accomplished, and here's somebody I connected with and how it felt.
Mm.
I think that would be a perfect thing to start with.
Well, that's a beautiful reminder for all of us, whether we are active in journaling or not. I think that's something we should all be able to do. And I imagine we're all going to feel much better when we're done it.
Yeah.
So, Melanie, thank you so much for being here today. This has been very, very insightful and very meaningful, I think, for a lot of people, and it can significantly change lives and the direction of our lives for our kids.
Yeah. Well,
So,
thank you.
thank you.
I'm really grateful for the opportunity to be here and share what I love.
Thank you, Melanie, very much. Be well. And everyone watching, take care of yourselves. And remember, put that pen to paper and write down the things that you're grateful for. Thanks again, Melanie.
Thank you. Take care.
You too. Bye.
Bye bye.